Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to everybody for another session in the ISKI Certification Days. Wow, what a day we've had. I've just been listening to the session from Rick Masalis on DevOps, and as ever, learned a lot, took a lot away from it, and thoroughly enjoyed hearing Rick speak, as always. I'm delighted to have with me George Wilkinson. I'm going to hand over to George soon, and he'll introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background and go into his presentation. Just to set the scene a little bit, I think George's presentation is particularly apt at the moment. George and I are both in the UK and under lockdown currently, and like a lot of people working from home. It's been challenging times for a lot of us, and George wants to talk a little bit about how we can actually thrive during challenging times, talking about managing ourselves, talking about managing ourselves through difficulties, and a little bit about some of the decision-making processes that we might be going through at the moment. So George, welcome. I'm going to hand over to you now and start your presentation. So everybody sit back and enjoy.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Good evening, everyone who's on the line. This is probably a slightly different presentation from some of the others, if you've seen them today, that you may be used to. So essentially, I give you a bit of my background. So I started off my career in the armed services. I spent 7 years in the Royal Navy, and I've spent almost 3 decades, feeling old now, in the IT world, doing various leadership roles, training roles, consultant roles, management roles in public and private sectors. I've been in a variety of different industries, working from healthcare, defence, digital communication, air traffic control, and I've kind of got the T-shirt, seen it and done it. And as far as I'm concerned, like anyone else, I suppose, getting quite comfortable in IT, wanting to do the best that I could. I thought I had a balanced life. And really, that was never the more could be wrong, because I was becoming a bit of a yes person. I was trying to be too much of a perfectionist. I've got to be honest with you. And in 2015, I had some major work and life challenges. So the situation was, I was working as a self-employed contract person on a major project, and it was so demanding. I was going home at 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning, only to arrive into work for 8 to 8:30 the following morning. That's the kind of trend I was getting into. Work-life balance had completely gone out of the window, and also some major sort of life challenges in addition to that. I thought I could do it all. I mean, I've been in IT for so long. I was a well-rounded experience, but actually things got the better of me. And through a lot of stress and strain, I badly prolapsed a disc in my back. I was there on my front room carpet. I couldn't walk, I couldn't crawl, I couldn't move. And my wife had to phone for an ambulance. In come the paramedics. Ironically, one of them being one of my best friends, and who was wondering if I'd had too much wine the night before, but no. But it was only when I actually was lying in hospital that I had to try and reflect on how I ended up in this position. There I was. I'd been on various projects and various major projects as well, and had a wealth of experience, but I was always trying to be a bit of a perfectionist. So I took a long, hard look at where I was going with my life and was I leading the best life? And I then worked with a performance coach. I did a lot of reflection, introspection, and research. And about 15, 18 months later, I began to write a book. The book is called Thrive, 7 Steps to Successful Self-Leadership, which, as Debbie was just mentioning just a few minutes ago, is particularly apt at the moment. Self-leadership, what is it? Well, it's all about trying to carve our way through life, to be more self-confident, resilient, become a better decision maker, trying to be the best person that we can be. This is not about leadership of others. This is about leadership of the person that's staring back in the mirror, leadership of yourself, trying to be the best person you can be when you can be. And let's face it, we can't always be the best person that we can be, but where we can, we should aim to be. Now, it's a wide and varied subject, and what I decided to do is through reflection, through research, is to try to encapsulate it into 7 chapters or 7 steps that I thought was particularly relevant. So these are the 7 steps that you can see in front of you now. So achieving success, perseverance, embracing failure, decision making, leading others, serving others, and emotional mastery. So it's quite a large, it's a fairly large topic, as I say, and what I'll try to do is to give you a brief outline of each particular chapter. But it's worthwhile to note that during my research, I actually conducted some interviews with other people, and I also got other authors to actually contribute to each chapter as well. So it's not just my research and my own sort of personal experiences. So achieving success. Okay. The first and second step, achieving success and perseverance, they're very, very closely linked. But what is success? What does success mean to you? Something that I pose in the book. Success, typically in the West, when we think of success, we're thinking of successful people, wealthy people, business people, entrepreneurs, sports people, writers. But actually, success really is truly personal to you. Success can be something as simple as surviving another day of the job, getting on with your boss, having a great relationship at home, having a great work-life balance. So success is truly personal, but and it can be very simple things. But if we try and stretch ourselves, if we try and achieve something greater, we are actually faced with success saboteurs that want you to play things safe, that want you to resist change. Now, these saboteurs, what are they? They are automatic and mental, not voices, but thought patterns that we think about. They'll be saying to us, well, you're too big, you're too small, you're too old, you're too young, you're just not good enough, just play it safe. So in order to try and address saboteurs, we need to think differently, and we need to become far more self-aware of what we're dealing with and what we want in life. And that leads me very nicely on to perseverance, because when we're trying to persevere in anything in life, we're trying to strive for something difficult, arduous, then ideally, one of the best ways to address the saboteurs is to find something that intrinsically motivates us, where we can set goals that we believe in. So intrinsic motivation is very different from extrinsic motivation, something that comes from without. A great example of extrinsic motivation will be money, cash. That will keep us going for so long. But if it doesn't motivate us, what we're actually trying to do, then we will tend to lose interest. So to be extrinsically motivated by something, here you've got a passion, you've got an inner drive, an inner want, an inner need. And here we cannot overcome most things in life. In addition to that, if we have an inner purpose, we realize what we're doing, we appreciate what we're doing, it's something that drives us forward in life. We can then have a belief in our goals and what we're trying to achieve. One great example is Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned for 27 years for his anti-apartheid activities in South Africa in 1962. Imprisoned for 27 years and released in 1990, only to then go on from his imprisonment by the country that put him in there, and actually turn his cheek and become the president of South Africa in 1994. Now, when Nelson was interviewed afterwards about his difficult times in prison, he said it wasn't difficult. What he was doing was preparing. He was preparing himself for something greater, preparing to change his country, because he had an inner drive and an inner belief. Let's face it, to persevere, to succeed in something that is full of grit and difficulty can be very hard. And in order to do these things, we need to find what drives us inside, and that will help us, hopefully, to see things through. Now, failure is quite the opposite of success, obviously. And we can be very fearful of failure because failure stings. There's no doubt about it, failure does hurt, especially deep failures, failures that impact us emotionally. And as a result of that, what we'll try to do is we'll try to avoid failure at all costs. We will cheat, we will lie, we will pay people to try and avoid failure. But if you take something like Edison, who invented the electric light bulb. Now, if you look at various websites and try to get information from the internet, is how many times he failed, because it's a common story. Some pages say 1,000, some others will say 2,000. But irrespective of how many times he failed, he tried a heck of a lot to succeed. He embraced his failure. He tried to adjust and understand where he was going wrong. Now, in the book, I cover a kind of 4-step process or 4 phases of how to accept and deal with more personal failure. The first part is to accept that you have failed, to be self-compassionate, to empathize with yourself, not to beat yourself up too much. I mean, us as human beings, we can end up in a state of mind where if someone else fails, a partner, a work colleague, someone that you know well, you will tend to be compassionate with their failure. You will tend to worry about them. You will tend to care for them. But as soon as you fail, you're so self-critical that actually we should be reversing that. We should then reflect why we went wrong. What went wrong? What was the reason behind it? And then looking at our strategy, try to adapt a strategy such that we can progress, we can course correct, and we can actually move forward with a different approach. Now, you may have heard the expression, fail fast and fail often. And whilst I don't necessarily believe that people look for failure, the expression comes about because people are trying to see what doesn't work such that they can succeed. And this is where I think gratitude comes in. So whilst we're not looking for failure, we need to be far more self-compassionate with respect to our own failures and be grateful for the fact that we can learn from them, such that we're actually viewing failure in a completely different light. So I'm not looking for failure, but when it happens, we take on a far more constructive approach to how we respond to it. Now, this is closely related to making decisions. Sometimes when making decisions, I'm sure we've all been there, we just simply can't decide. And these are the big decisions. These are the ones that have an emotional connection with us. We can end up in a situation where we reach analysis paralysis. So analysis paralysis is where you're actually trying to solve all the problems inside your head. You're not making them objective. You may have a fear of failure, too much information, not enough information, or you've got a responsibility issue. But essentially, you're paralyzed from actually deciding. You cannot move forward. It doesn't have to be anything monumental in terms of decision making. It's something relatively trivial, but actually emotionally it impacts you for some reason. When in this state, you can feel frustrated, confused, and you make no progress. Now, I've seen this in myself, and I've seen it in countless amount of people around me. And there's many books written on decision making because it actually can be a very difficult subject. So I decided to tackle this in my book, Thrive, where I come up with a kind of a 4-step sequence. Firstly, is knowing what you want. And this, for some people, can be one of the hardest things. So I do try to address methods and techniques for actually trying to understand and know what you want. Secondly, is to gather the facts, is to make things objective, to try and take all of the decision making out of your head and onto paper or a board or whatever have you, just to try and get it out there somewhere, and to try and keep things factual and understand and gather data that you need to in order to make the decisions, whether it be sort of raw computer data, financial data, or whatever it may be, people's opinions, marketing information, whatever it may be. Next is to consider choices. The last place we want to be, especially when making a fairly serious decision, is backed into a corner. We don't want to be there. We want to be in a position where we have choice. Not too much choice such that we're overwhelmed, but enough choice such that we've actually got some freedom. We feel that we've got opportunity such that if one option doesn't work, we can then try a second option. And this is where we come to step 4, making the decision itself and actually following through and taking action. And in the book, there's hints, tips, and tricks about actually this particular scenario. Now, there's 2 things that we should be quite mindful of and aware of when we're going through the process of decision making. The first is what's called an unconscious bias. So these are beliefs, traits, unconscious understandings in your mind that will actually bend and twist and influence you emotionally to actually make decisions. I'll give you a kind of crazy example, but it's very real. My wife's ex-boss does not like men with beards, and he would make decisions on recruitment based upon whether a man had a beard or not, regardless of how good he was in terms of his CV and how well he came across. That was a deep unconscious bias inside him. In addition to unconscious biases, we should also be aware that we need to seek advice sometimes through a counsel, a mentor, a coach, a partner, someone who you can trust in order to share the load. Because some decisions can be very tough for us. So we shouldn't feel that we have the responsibility to take all the burden on our shoulders. So as I say, it's a 4-step process that you can go through in order to help you make clear decisions. And I've used this process several times myself, and I used it in order to try and refine it and to make it work. Next, we come on to a subject about leading others, leading other people, whether that be a team, a community, a family, an organization, wherever it may be. Now, I firmly believe, having been in leadership positions in the past, that leading other people is a blessing. It's a gift. If you have to inspire them, direct them, care for them, mother and father within reason, command them on occasions, you're actually influencing that other person or those people on an emotional level, and you can literally change their lives. You can really move people forward in their progression by leading them effectively. But this chapter is not about really leadership, although I do cover certain leadership techniques and tips through my research. It's also about the relationship between self-leadership and leadership itself. Now, if you take just 3 examples of self-leadership: responsibility, or being responsible, being self-confident, and being able to communicate. These are 3 fundamental skills, a variety of skills you need in respect to your own self-leadership in order to help lead others. If you were working for someone and they were in charge of you, they had the responsibility to lead you, if they couldn't be responsible in terms of their actions and their behaviors, if they weren't self-confident to any sort of reasonable degree, and they couldn't communicate well, so they weren't talking to you in the right way, and more importantly, they weren't listening to what you were saying, where does that place them as the leader? No, self-leadership qualities are a fundamental core aspect of an effective leader, especially in the modern day and age, which is probably the most demanding era that anyone's ever worked in. Now, this topic, serving others, which it actually is the last chapter in the book, but it's the second to last one I want to cover today, is all about taking the gaze off the person in the mirror and definitely putting it onto other people. So this phrase here, or this quote rather, never look down on anyone else unless you're helping him up. And it can be a her, obviously, of course. That really sums up what the chapter is about. It's about we're all human beings, and we all have relationships with other people. And if you want to achieve anything of real substance in life, then you're going to have to rely on other people. But try doing that without showing some compassion, some kindness, some benevolence, some caring. You're not going to get very far in life. It's actually been researched, and I reference the research in my book that actually there's been experiments conducted in the US, maybe in other places as well, but the ones I refer to have been in the US, where actually through MRI scans, they've actually shown the differences that it makes to individuals when they believe they're conducting a philanthropic venture. So actually, if they're trying to, say, help someone else through monetary reasons or similar, it actually lights up the brain. So there's as well as when you give and serve other people, you're giving to them, it actually benefits you. And I firmly believe through my reflection and my research that serving others in some respects does actually make you a more rounded person, a more rounded individual. So it's and if you can feel that way, you can feel that difference inside you, and other people can see it as well, it will definitely help you get sort of through in work and in life without a shadow of a doubt. The last step that I'm going to cover, which is actually not the last chapter in the book because this is right in the middle, is emotional mastery or emotional management. It's a quite large chapter because it's a very complex topic, and there's a lot to it. So I talk about positive emotions, negative emotions, emotional intelligence, which is a whole wealth of a chapter, an area of itself. I mean, whole books have been written through about emotional intelligence. But one thing that I introduce myself is what I call emotional foundations. So these are fundamental elements that we can, through our behavior and our actions, that help create a greater emotional stability. Now, where we are today with COVID around, it's a very sort of fear-based world that we're living in, a lot of worry. And it has been said to me by several people that are reading my book, which has only been out just a few short weeks, that actually this book has hit the nail on the head in terms of some of the messages that are coming out. So just to briefly touch on each of these foundations, the whole concept of these foundations is that if we're living and conscious of them and acting into them, that it won't necessarily solve all our emotional problems, no, but it will help us to gain more emotional stability. Healthy sleep is an example. So if we're sleeping well, we feel better, improved. You only have to ask parents of young children that are only getting 3 or 4 hours a night because of disturbed sleep, how do they feel the next day? grotty, irritable, and horrible. Physical exercise. There's been a lot of research into the effects, especially through cardiovascular exercise, into the benefits because of all the natural chemicals, endorphins, that are actually produced in the body. You have some hard cardiovascular exercise, you do feel a whole lot better. It increases your well-being without a shadow of a doubt. Physical diet. Again, drawing on the analogy of children, if you see children going off to sugar-rich birthday parties, they're bouncing off the walls afterwards because of the effect that sugar actually has on the system, sugar spikes. Caffeine is another great example. And these are two simple examples of how some foodstuffs can actually change our emotions and actually provide an imbalance for a period of time. So we should be more conscious of what we're eating. And I do go into that in the book. This next one, mental diet, might strike you as a bit of an odd term. And what I mean by mental diet is that if you think about it, and again, drawing back to this current climate we're in at the moment, the amount of information that's coming into our heads on a daily basis through the media, social media, television, radio, the list goes on. It's constant if we allow it to, and a portion of it is negative. And mental diet is all about it's like physical diet, it's about trying to choose what we listen to and what we watch, such that we can help prevent our emotions being impacted negatively. Mental relaxation. Now, again, through my research, I discovered that there's two real techniques that allows the mind to relax. Probably, I wouldn't say the most researched techniques, but they've got a lot of research over many decades. And one being meditation, or more notably, transcendental meditation, which was popularized in the 1960s, and hatha yoga. These two techniques, with the amount of research behind them, do actually provide credible evidence that they do increase your well-being and obviously give you, as a result, a more emotionally stable life. And what they're doing effectively is changing your state of consciousness such that you can sort of think and act more clearly and accurately. I mean, I used to do hatha yoga during lunchtimes where I used to work in Basingstoke in England, and I was bombed out afterwards. But you just think so much clearer afterwards after a session of that. So, as I said, emotional foundations, 5 key elements that help provide greater emotional stability. And if we can embrace these, in our lives and try and act into them, then it definitely helps with our well-being. So that's my book, Thrive: 7 Steps to Successful Self-Leadership. I've covered the 7 areas. The 7 areas come through research, through my reflection, working with my coach, and also through my interviews with other people. And as I say, each chapter has got a contribution from another author about their personal experiences into success, perseverance, decision making, and so on and so forth. The book has only been out about 6 weeks now. It's available in all sort of ebook stores. But I also do talks on each particular aspect. If anyone is interested in hearing more, it's an area that I find passionate. It took me 3 years to actually put the book together, and it is currently, as I say, just out, and it's been sort of well received. So I would like to thank you for your time. I've hoped that I've helped provide some insight into what my book's about, but also maybe it's giving you a kind of a thought as to some things that can actually that may be lacking in your own lives and your own actions that maybe you can benefit from. And hopefully I've helped with that today.
Oh, thank you, George. Thank you so much. That was really insightful and certainly gave me some food for thought. Just thinking a little bit about ISKI and what we are. We're a certification body, so obviously we do exams, and people need to prepare for these exams, and sometimes they will prepare through accredited training. We work with a network of accredited training providers around the world. Sometimes they'll self-study. So a question to you, keeping the motivation if you're self-studying and preparing for an exam, do you have some tips and tricks for that? Some ideas about what people might do to make sure that actually they've got that end goal, I'm going to take this exam and hopefully get through it, and keeping that motivation to study, very positive?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I think we can all sort of lean into this question really, because I think we've all been in positions where we've had to take exams, and we may not necessarily have the correct strategy. Well, one thing I would say is that it depends on the reason why you're doing the exam, and it might be something that maybe your employer has said that you have to do, and if you're interested, then that's great. But to have an interest in it from a start is a good aspect. To be able to understand that through an entire syllabus, you're not going to like everything. There's going to be aspects in that syllabus that you feel is not relevant, it's not that interesting, but actually you need to cover it. Now, I would say that what you need to do, first of all, is connect with that syllabus on an emotional level and find out actually what you are genuinely interested in, and such that that's giving you that intrinsic motivation to actually do the qualification. And for those aspects that aren't so great, then it's just a case of the fact that they're there and you have to do them. But if you can find that sort of passion and interest in what is for the reason for the exam and the content area, that'll be incredibly useful. The other aspect is self-management. It's if you don't have to look very hard to hear tips and tricks on things like how to sort of revise for exams and in terms of our management, but rarely we do these things. We see it on the internet, say revise for 50 minutes and have a break for 10 or 15 and revise, and we really do it. But actually, if we do that, if we do actually shut off our time and say, okay, well, this is my schedule, I'm going to maybe learn or revise for maybe 3/4 of an hour, and I'm going to switch off all, easier said than done sometimes, all my distractions, and that's going to be my intent. And then you allow yourself a break. If we go on with that sort of management mindset, then we're actually trying to then lead ourselves through the exam. So hopefully that's 2 tips to help there.
Really, really useful. I think that intrinsic motivation, what's in it for me, finding what you feel a little bit passionate about is really important. I have a question here from you, for you from Lewis. Going back to leadership, which is more important in leadership, empowering or inspiring those who work under you?
Well, there's a good question from Lewis. So empowering or inspiring, I think that both have their place. I think that where people need empowered, so where they need the drive, the strength, and the passion to continue, and then you need to empower. And when you need to inspire, then to provide the inspiration, then you should do so. But one thing I would say is that if you're going to provide inspiration to other people, which is easier said than done, you first need to inspire yourself. Because if you can't inspire yourself, you will never, ever be able to pass on that energy and that communication to who you're trying to talk to. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen people trying to inspire me when they're not inspired. So both have their place, but if you're going to inspire someone else, be inspired yourself.
Have that enthusiasm. It can be very infectious. Yeah, that's perfect. Question for you here. Hi, George. How do we best manage a work-life balance, particularly at the moment where so many of us are working at home, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think that I mean, one of the pits that I fell into was trying to be a perfectionist and um, try to do everything correctly and not being able to say no. So
Yeah.
you need to understand what's important to you, how to prioritize, and also where demands are being placed upon you unrealistically. I think it's just about saying no there. I mean, definitely had it myself. The kind of project that I was talking about, where I was driving home at 1, 2 in the morning, it was about 11:30 at night, and I had a demand placed on me that if I followed it through all to the end, I would have been there to 5 or 6 o'clock next morning. So I had to have the guts and the resource and resilience to turn around and say, no, it's not going to happen.
Mm. Particularly at the moment where it's easy to actually go to wherever you're working at home and pick up and go and carry on until quite late.
Yeah, I mean, this is the surreal sort of situation we're in at the moment, is the fact that you can sit at your desk and you're actually at home, and it kind of bleeds from one end to the other. And the fact that before you know it, you're working way past the hours that you would normally work. And really, it just comes back to a lot of self-discipline and self-management, and that can be hard if you're definitely intrinsically motivated in what you're doing and you've got a lot of interest. That can be very, very tough. But sometimes it's about ensuring that you're also sort of listening to what other people are saying to you as well. So if you're constantly going back into the house where other people are, and it sort of far too late all the time, and you don't want to sort of have it in the neck, then you need to listen to other people.
Again, going back to what ISKI do, certification exams, often that's linked to career management and people trying to further themselves and progress. Have you got some ideas about how people can stay on that career path and actively manage their career? Some things people might just think about to help them stay motivated to do that?
That's a jolly good question. And I think that is one thing I would say with hindsight is that it's easier to look back on your life and the things that you've done, and you don't necessarily like, and actually to see that they're actually providing a lot of benefit. That's one thing I will say. So even although you think that something is not driving you, inspiring you, it's fulfilling you, actually you're actually learning. So always take the opportunity to learn, unless you genuinely feel it's completely redundant and it's not actually giving you any sort of motivation or fulfillment at all. I think that it comes back to sort of resetting yourself on a fairly frequent basis. So maybe once a quarter or every half a year or a year, actually taking the opportunity to reflect on the previous 6 months or a year, understand where you have come from and where you're actually going to. So a lot of it's down to just good self-management, self-direction. And obviously, as I say, if you're sometimes doing tasks that you don't like, they're teaching you, definitely teaching you.
That's wonderful. George, I think we've come to the end, more or less, of the broadcast today. So thank you so much. A little bit different to some of the technical broadcasts we do, but I think really useful. It's a good time to take stock, I think, and think about things like how we're managing our careers, managing ourselves, making the most of the situation that we're in. And I know certainly I'll be listening again to some of the ideas that you've talked about today and looking at your book. So that's Thrive, and certainly, as I said in the introduction, I think it's really apt for the situation at the moment. Keep in touch, George, and thank you so much. We'll say goodbye to everybody, and just quickly for people who are tuning into the live streams, we've got another few days of really good topics and good speakers. So please watch out for us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and also our YouTube channels, and hope to see you again soon. George, my thanks yet again. Thank you.
Cheers, David. Thank you.
Yeah. Cheerio. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.